All right. If you need a Bible this morning, would you raise your hands and let our ushers get you one? Turn to John chapter 1. That's where we'll start. John chapter 1. But before we dig too deep into the Word, a couple of kind of house cleaning announcement type stuff. So, Bibles first. And then I wanted to acknowledge, just the people who showed up for us last, Monday night? I sent a 3 o'clock email that said, hey, we're going to try to make some ribbons for, the Reynolds prayer vigil. And it was a typo. It wasn't 5,000, it was 2,000. And a bunch of you came, a bunch of you showed up, and you made these ribbons, and you outdid yourselves. They were looking just for the ribbons, but man, you actually hot glued them, and I saw some of your skin sitting on the tables from where you had to peel the hot glue off of you. If you volunteered and showed up, would you just raise your hand where you're at? And Bev Campbell, yeah. Thank you so much for that. I think it was a very meaningful thing that we were able to do. And thanks, Bev, I called her Monday morning and said, can you go find ribbon? Me and Joanne Fabric would probably not get along real well. I walk by the store and start to twitch. So, anyway, I also want to introduce to you Larry Whittlesley, and Larry's right over here. Larry, would you just raise your hand for us real quick? I asked you to pray for Larry. Larry is the executive director for the School Partnership Network, and he was called upon to kind of lead that initiative for our school district. And he did an outstanding job at involving community leaders, pastors, all sorts of churches, families and students, and it was a great moment to be together. And so thank you for showing up. Thanks for praying, even if you weren't able to be there. Continue to pray for the Reynolds School District, the families, as they try to heal the trauma that this kind of thing creates. So, good? Another announcement. Do you have my picture there? There I am. There we are. So, again, I shared this with you a couple of weeks ago. I just want to share it with you again. This is myself and my wife, Sarah, and our son, Tucker. And Tucker's 5.5 years old. And we leave Wednesday morning to go pick up this addition to our family. Yes. That is Elliot Thomas. And we're going to call him Eli. So, Elliot Thomas. And he is he's currently living on the island of St. Vincent, which is a small island out in the far West Indies, so south of the Caribbean, kind of almost to South America. And he's eager to meet his parents also, as eager as we are to meet him. And so we leave Wednesday morning to go there, and basically we have court next Monday morning at 9 a.m., which is 3 hours difference, so it's 6 a.m. here. For those of you up at 6 a.m., your prayers would be very appreciated. We've got court, and then we have just a process that we have to go through to get paperwork finalized and birth certificates changed and a passport and all this kind of stuff. And then we will fly to the island of Barbados, where the U.S. Embassy is, and complete all the necessary paperwork there before we come back home. And so we will be home hopefully in July. That's the plan anyway. But we know how plans go, right? And so just really would appreciate your prayers for our family as we travel. Just as we're away, pray that our dollar is stretched, and pray that just the process through the courts and through the U.S. government are seamless and good and easy, and we can be back home where we all want to be with our new little addition to our family. Sound good? Perfect. So I'll be gone a couple of weeks. Everything's well taken care of. Our leadership team and our leaders, man, they can do it. They can do it. So I'd ask that you pray for them as they fill in some shoes also. Good? Perfect. The verse I want to talk about today, if I was to be real honest with you, is a verse that I really started trying to apply to my own life about 1.5 years ago. And I wanted to be able to say to you this morning that I've conquered it. And I've accomplished it, and here's how you do it. Unfortunately, I stand before you still trying to apply this verse fully into my life. And what I've realized is it's a verse that's a big challenge. It's a big challenge for us. It's hard. It's hard. It's challenging. It's a struggle. And part of the reason that it's such a challenge and a struggle is because our culture calls us to think about ourselves all the time. Our culture demands that you think about yourself, you take care of yourself, you worry about yourself, you look out for number one, all these things. And so the verse I want us to focus on this morning is from John chapter 3, and it's verse 30, and it simply says this. John the Baptist said it. He said, "He must increase, but I must decrease." He must increase, but I must decrease. I mean, this is an easy verse to memorize, is it not? It is an easy verse to quote. It's an incredibly easy verse just to remember, but it is incredibly challenging to live out. It's a hard verse to live out. So let's dig in and look at a little bit of the history here. John chapter 1 is where I want to start. John chapter 1 verse 19 says this. "And this is the testimony of John. When the Jews sent priests and Levites from Jerusalem to ask him, 'Who are you?' He confessed, and did not deny, but confessed, 'I am not the Christ.' And they asked him, 'What then? Are you Elijah?' He said, 'I am not.' 'Are you the prophet?' And he answered, 'No.' So they said to him, 'Who are you?' 'We need to give an answer to those who sent us. What do you say about yourself?' He said, 'I am the voice of one carrying out in the wilderness, make straight the way of the Lord,' as the prophet Isaiah said." Now they had been sent from the Pharisees. They asked him, "Then why are you baptizing if you are neither the Christ nor Elijah nor the prophet?" And John answered them, "I baptize with water, but among you stands one you do not know, even he who comes after me, the strap of whose sandal I am not worthy to untie." These things took place in Bethany across the Jordan, where John was baptizing. So catch on to that. Turn over to chapter 3. Let's pick up a little bit more of this story in verse 22. "After this, Jesus and his disciples went into the Judean countryside, and he remained there with them and was baptizing. John also was baptizing, because water was plentiful there, and because people were coming and being baptized, for John had not yet been put in prison, which we know will happen. Now a discussion arose between some of John's disciples and a Jew over purification. And they came to John and said to him, 'Rabbi, he who was with you across the Jordan, to whom you bore witness, look, he is baptizing, and everyone's going over to him.' And John answered, 'A person cannot receive even one thing unless it is given him from heaven. You yourselves bear witness that I am not the Christ, but I have been sent before him. The one who has the bride is the bridegroom. The friend of the bridegroom who stands and hears him rejoices greatly at the bridegroom's voice. Therefore the joy of mine is now complete. He must increase, but I must decrease.'" I mean, John was baptizing. This is an interesting story because John's baptizing right there in the middle of the Jordan River. He's sitting there baptizing. John has told his disciples, hasn't he? "I'm not Jesus. I'm not the Christ. I'm not the promised one. I'm not going to be here." He's had this conversation with him. People continually come and ask, "Well, tell us who you are then. Who are you? Why are you doing what you're doing?" And over and over and over, he says, "You need to understand, I'm not the Christ. I'm just the one who comes before the Christ. I'm not worthy to untie the sandal strap. He's coming." But then the day came, and Jesus and his disciples are down the river a little bit, and they're baptizing. And John's disciples are going, I don't know that I like this so much. "John, what's going on here? Why are they down there baptizing?" They might have felt a little frustration, I don't know, because everyone seems to be going to Jesus instead of John. And John said it. He said, "He must increase, but I must decrease." Almost as if John was letting these followers know that second place was going to be okay. The second place was going to be all right. And isn't that very countercultural to the way we think? I mean, second place in our world is what? You're just the first loser. That's right. Second place in our book, you're just the first loser, so way to go, you big loser. And we have to outwit, we have to outplay, we have to outland our competition and get a leg up because we all have to be number one. You know it. It's the culture we live in. You know that we've got to look out for ourselves and be number one. But then John the Baptist says, he must increase, but I must decrease. Do you know anyone who lives like this? I mean, really, seriously, completely, fully lives like this. I mean, because we're so familiar with making life all about us. It's all about what we do. It's all about our career. Who cares who I have to step over or step on or jump over or whatever to climb the corporate ladder? It's all about position, where I'm headed. You get the point. You know the examples. But this idea of decreasing while increasing Him, this is not our typical thought process. It's not our typical thought process because everything that we do in life typically increases. I mean, think about it this way. To grow physically, we have to increase, right? We get bigger, we get taller, or wider for some of us. We grow up. You get stronger. I mean, all sorts of things happen. Physically, you begin to increase. But spiritually to grow, it sounds like we're being told we need to decrease. That we need to be a little bit less. We need to decrease. Mother Teresa said this. She said this, if you are humble, nothing will touch you. Neither praise nor disgrace, because you know what you are. You know who you are. And this thought and this idea is so different from what we know. What does it really mean to make life more about Jesus and less about me? What does it mean to make life more about Him and less about me? Less about me and more about Jesus simply means this: I must lose my focus. I must lose my focus. Hebrews 12, 1 and 2 says this, therefore, since we are surrounded by so great a cloud of witnesses, let us lay aside every weight and sin which clings so closely, and let us run with endurance the race that is set before us. Get this, looking to Jesus, the founder and perfecter of our faith, who for the joy that was set before Him endured the cross, despising the shame, and is seated at the right hand of the throne of God now. Did you catch that? If you're going to do this life and do this life thing, where do we need to look? Toward Jesus. We need to lose my focus. We have to get the focus off of us thinking that life is all about us. You were designed, you were created for a purpose. You are given a purpose to be here. And when we get our focus on the right spot, on the right things, then it seems like life's troubles kind of seem to line out just a little bit. And the problem we have in our lives is that we focus on too many things. We have so much to focus on. We have our families to focus on, our jobs, our kids, our finances. We have our homes, our health, and our education. We have all these things to focus on, don't we? But then you add the other things, our self-reliance, our personal freedom, our life changes, our pursuit for knowledge, our pursuit for more, our push for greater gains, and our lust for fun. I mean, we have so much to focus on, don't we? Life is full of things that draw our attention toward. And if everything is important, then nothing is important. And Jesus is saying, put your eyes on me. Put your focus on me. Don't let me just be another thing that you happen to consider important. Don't let me just be another thing to put your focus on. Instead, focus on me. Look toward me, because I am the founder and I am the perfecter of your faith. Focusing on Christ and the things He focuses on, they give us a different picture. Because in the midst of death, we find life. In the midst of opportunities, there are always obstacles, but those obstacles can be considered as opportunities. In the midst of despair, when our focus is on Christ, we will find hope. In the midst of hate, when our focus is on Christ, we will find love. We will find good where you find evil. When our focus is on Christ. The first thing we must do is increase Jesus. We must focus on Him and lose the focus on the things that aren't as important as He is. I must also lose my stuff. We've talked a lot about stuff, all right? I know that, but Ecclesiastes 5:10 says this, "He who loves money will not be satisfied with money, nor he who loves wealth with his income." The richest man in the world, Solomon, the richest man in the world who had everything, he said this. He said it. If you love money, you will never be satisfied with your money. He says it right there. And he who loves wealth, you'll never be satisfied with your paycheck. It'll never be enough. It will never be big enough. And Solomon is the wisest person on the face of this planet, the wealthiest person on the face of the planet, and he says this is true. We think there's always room for more and always room for new, and it is crazy. I mean, I can walk into a store and look around in a store and realize how many things I needed that I didn't need. I watch commercials and I think, man, I sure would like that. Would have never thought about it my entire life unless I saw it. And we have this discussion at our home because they have appliances for everything. I mean, you have waffle makers and you have 50 types of waffle makers, and then you have quesadilla makers, and then you have tortilla makers, and then you have rice makers, and then you have all these other things, which, by the way, you can do all of those things with a simple pan and skillet. But you walk through the store and that quesadilla maker just looks so cool. It's a pain in the patootie to clean. I mean, seriously, you can walk through life and stuff. Everywhere we turn, there's stuff. It's unbelievable. It's crazy how insatiable and how our desire for more grows. And when we begin to learn that life isn't really about all of our stuff, it'll make all the difference in the world. Why? Because then we don't become emotionally connected to it. God never gave us things. He never intended to give us things so that we would become emotionally connected to stuff. I mean, think about it. Think about it. You pull into our church parking lot right over here, right? And you're walking out this morning and you see somebody open their door and bang into someone else's car and you think, whoo, I'm glad that wasn't me. Feel sorry for them. And then you reach to your car and somebody's got their door and your door. You take it personal, don't you? Because we got this emotional connection to our stuff. We have this emotional desire to make sure we take care of our stuff. When we think it's all ours, that's where we go wrong. When we think it's all ours, we can become emotionally connected and attached to stuff. We'll mourn stuff. We'll desire more stuff. For the first time, I was watching the Today Show the other morning. My wife and I were watching it, and I loved it. Some guy got on TV, one of their segments, and said, here's the deal. Here are all the new electronics. Here are the ones you need. Here are the ones you don't need. And I thought, wow. He's telling us not to buy certain things while trying to tell us, but you should really go out and buy these things. So I dug into it a little more just to know and preparing for this message. He works for Apple. So guess what items you needed to buy to be most updated on? Yes. We get emotionally connected to our stuff all the time. But we do it to our time also. I mean, we make to-do lists. We make agendas. We make plans. We put together all these things. But then when those plans and those agendas and those to-do lists don't quite go the way We planned. What happens? We get frustrated. We're annoyed. We're irritated because my day, my list, my agenda, and my plans got interrupted. However, we don't need to look at those interruptions as negative. We need to look at them as opportunities. Opportunities to be an example, maybe to share love, maybe to give hope. Who knows what the opportunity might be? I call those things divine appointments when all of a sudden, out of the blue, you're planning on doing this, but then all of a sudden, out of the blue, somebody calls or somebody shows up or you run into somebody and the conversation goes a whole nother direction. You know, some of the sweetest moments of my day are those divine appointments. When I'm so glad I stopped to listen. When I paused to help. It makes a world of a difference. In Mexico, there's this phrase, mi casa es su casa. My house is your house. Every time I go to Mexico, they are so hospitable. Thank you for feeding us. Thank you for letting us in your house. Mi casa es su casa. It's what they say, and I think, that's what we need. We need to have that concept with our stuff, with our day, with our God. What is mine is His. My stuff, my focus, my plans, my job, it all needs to be His. And this includes our life. We must lose our life. We must lose our life. Whoever finds his life will lose it, and whoever loses his life for my sake will find it. And this is what Jesus said. This is bizarre thinking, is it not? I mean, listen to it. Whoever finds his life will lose it. And whoever loses his life for my sake will find it, right? This is bizarre thinking. I mean, Jesus clarifies that it's all about Him, and we can find our lives in things, we can find our lives in stuff, we can find our life in the midst of the latest fashion or the newest gadgets or gizmos. We can find our life in Facebook and make life all around Facebook when there's people right in front of us. We can find our lives in all sorts of things. But Jesus says, whoever finds his life will lose it. If you're attempting to find your life in your stuff, if you're attempting to find your life in your gadgets and your gizmos and your latest fashions and in your 401k, if you're trying to find life in all of those things, Jesus is being very clear. He's saying, you're going to lose it. It's going to be lost. Life without Jesus is empty. Life without Jesus is hopeless. Life with Jesus is fulfilling, and it's complete, and it's purposeful, and it's hard to decrease, is it not? It is a challenge to take second place, and John wasn't nonchalant about this. I can imagine that as his disciples came back to him and said, but John, did you see what Jesus and the disciples are doing? What are you going to do about it? That John was kind of saying, yes. I know why I was here. I know why I was sent. I know exactly that this was going to come. And so I accomplished it. And the mission's been fulfilled. And yes. Yes. I mean, you could almost picture John doing that. I mean, don't you do that with your children? You work on your children, you raise your children right, you teach them again, you reteach them again, you show patience and more patience to show them again and again and again. But at some point there's that moment when they get it and you go, yes, yes, they got it. Yes. And John's in this place because he understood that he must decrease and Jesus must increase. And if he was able to do that, then the mission would be accomplished. And it is so important for us to realize who we are and what we were designed for. Less about me and more about God. And more about what God wants to do through me. How does God feel when we get it? He's so proud. So here's the simple question. How? How do I make life more about Jesus and less about me? First of all, I need to say this. It is not an equation. I cannot stand up here and give you a natural, simple mathematic formula. I can't do it. I can't tell you that there's a special formula that if you just drink this every day, then, man, Jesus will increase. It just doesn't work that way. It's a formula. It's not an equation. It's a journey. And everybody's journey's a little bit different, is it not? Partially because some of you are more stubborn than others. Oswald Chambers said this: never make a principle out of your experience. Never make a principle out of your experience. Let God be as original with other people as He has been with you. I love that. Because there's really a lot of different ways to accomplish this. I've been practicing for 18 months, and I've still come close to fully making this a part of my life. But Romans chapter 12, verses 1 and 2, they say this: I appeal to you, therefore, brothers, by the mercies of God, to present your bodies as a living sacrifice, holy and acceptable to God, which is your spiritual worship. But listen to this: do not be conformed to this world, but be transformed by the renewal of your mind, that by testing you may discern what is the will of God, what is good, what is acceptable, what is perfect. Here's the deal. If we want Jesus to increase, we must decrease. Then we've got to change our patterns. We've got to change the patterns in our lives. The biggest pattern is the idea that life is all about us. Margaret Thatcher said this: watch your thoughts, for your thoughts, they become your words. Watch your words, for your words become your actions. Watch your actions, because your actions will become your habits. Watch your habits, for they will become your character. And watch your character, because they will become your destiny. Renewing our mind is a journey that takes time. However, I've got two simple steps for us. Number one is this: be renewed by spending quality time with God. We don't talk about this much in the church anymore because we always feel so much guilt around it. That I've got to do this daily Bible plan reading, and if I don't do it just right, then I can't really talk about it because, man, I beat myself up and I fell back and I'm behind and all this kind of stuff. And we've made a lot of that not the point. The point is, when you want to have a relationship with somebody, then you naturally want to spend time with that person, don't you? When you naturally want to grow your relationship with your spouse, then don't you need to spend time with them? When you want to work on your relationship with your children, doesn't it require some quality time? In your relationship with God, we need to look at it as we want a relationship with Him. And therefore, we need to spend quality time with Him. I mean, this is in prayer, and Bible reading. It's both. Prayer, tell God how great He is. Tell God your hopes. Tell God your dreams. Tell God how much you appreciate what He does. When you need help, ask Him for help. Read the Bible, not as a chore, as something that you want to do to grow and understand who He is and what He might have for your life. That's why we do that. A year and a half ago, I started this book of John study where I just read a little bit until I got a piece of nugget that I could write about. A year and a half ago, I stopped at John 3:30. Because I went, whoa. I've read this, I don't know how many times, but this is a call to discipleship. That He must increase and I must decrease. The second thing is this: be renewed by your daily obedience to God. Romans 6 says this: do you not know that if you present yourselves to anyone as obedient slaves, you are slaves of the one whom you obey? And Paul goes on, he says, you will either obey sin, which leads to death, or be obedience, which will lead to righteousness. It's really hard sometimes to set ourselves aside. It's really challenging sometimes to say, you know what? Fine, I'll be obedient. What are you going to be obedient to? What in your life are you obedient to? Are you obedient to your sin, or are you obedient to Christ? What you have to do is you have to take your thoughts captive. We've talked about that before. Make Jesus more in your life and decrease everything else in your life, including you. For example, think about these things. Sometimes you have to preach to yourself. You think the spirit is willing, but the flesh is weak, right? Well, you must decrease and he must increase. You don't think you want to fight for your marriage, right? You must decrease, he must increase. You think your addiction isn't hurting anyone, right? You must decrease and he must increase. You think it's a waste of time to serve. You must decrease and he must increase. You think you deserve to be bitter because you've been hurt. You must decrease and he must increase. You think you shouldn't serve your husband because he doesn't deserve it. You must decrease and he must increase. You don't think you should speak nice to your wife because she doesn't talk nice to you. You must decrease and he must increase. You don't think that you need to work hard because your boss is a jerk. You must decrease and he must increase. This is a hard thing to do in our lives. Yet we're called to do it. Let's pray. Father, thanks. Thanks for the example of John the Baptist. God, thank you that you've called all of us to be somewhat like John. That we're here, Father, to prepare the way for you. We're here to prepare the way for your second coming. We're here to help people find you, to know you, to find your love, and to be drawn in by the hope you give. God, work on us. Change our thinking. Change our patterns. And help us be mindful that you must increase. And the only way you can increase is if we decrease. God, help us make life more about you and less about us. In Jesus' name, amen. I want to read the rest of John chapter 3 as we prepare for communion. It says this: He who comes from above is above all. He who is of the earth belongs to the earth and speaks in an earthly way. He who comes from heaven is above all. He bears witness to what he has seen and heard, yet no one receives his testimony. Who receives his testimony sets his seal to this, that God is true. For he whom God has sent utters the words of God, for he gives the Spirit without measure. The Father loves the Son and has given all things into his hand. Whoever believes in the Son has eternal life. Whoever does not obey the Son shall not see life. As you think about communion this morning, be thankful. Be thankful that Jesus didn't ask you to die on the cross. Instead, he willingly went to the cross on your behalf. Think about the cross. And that the cross brought life, and the cross brought hope, and the cross brought things that we couldn't find anywhere else. And ask God to help you decrease so he might increase.